Hello? You there? You there? Jimmy Jam. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Doo doo. You should be here any second. Jimmy Jam. Where you at? So what's up, guys? What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? I wish I could contact y'all through time and space. Oh! Is that him? Oh, there he is. Can't hear you. Can't hear nothing. Who's that behind you? Who's the lady? Yeah, I can't hear you. I can see you. I can see your pretty face. Maybe I should just play some guitar while waiting. Oh, there he is. There he is.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, good.
I can hear you now.
Is the sound better? I'm at a different Starbucks.
Yeah, no, that actually good so far. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I have this microphone closer.
I can see that. It's a sexy mic there.
Yeah. So I'm gonna throw a curveball your way and decide to talk about what you had suggested instead of what I had prepared. So what was that? That was very interesting.
Yeah, what did I talk about? Okay. Making a distinction between the world of conceptual thought and abstract thought and the outside world, and how the human body is kind of an intermediate between the two. And if we don't treat the body right, if we don't work with the body properly, it becomes defective in that sense, and you can't really sync up what is going on inside of you and what is going on culturally on the conceptual level with what is actually in the world, what is going on around you, what you can actually affect.
So let me resume that.
Sure.
You're basically saying one. Well, let's think about it in terms of three sort of stages. So you have the human being, you have the conceptual world, and you have the real world, the existential world.
I would put the body in between the two.
Yeah, so almost like the human being is a tuning fork.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that's the way you had put it when you wrote it to me. You said, well, human beings are almost like a bridge between the conceptual world and reality. Now, what do you mean by conceptual, though? What are you talking about? Are you talking about like metaphysical worlds, just things that that arise from consciousness?
Okay, that's an interesting question, and it's not something I tapped into when we were talking earlier on Facebook in the chat. But I mean, there's a lot of diversity within the conceptual world, and there are things that connect to the outside world and things that connect less. Ultimately, it's everything going on in your head. If you can close your eyes and anything that you can conceive of, and often it's stuff that we actually project onto the world around us as well. Like just if you look at, like I'm looking at this lamp here, and I think about the qualities of it. Those qualities, those are concepts. Those are things in my mind that I'm projecting onto the lamp that aren't necessarily what the lamp actually is, or they might be accurate but not perfect.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
That's clear, because I think the existentialist point of view, or at least the people act out their lives with the idea that the world is extrinsically, I guess you could say, does exist apart and separate from themselves. But I think where we really need to make the distinction is when you say concept. So what are you saying? Like, what I mean, because if you're saying that the human being is kind of like the tuning fork between the real world and the conceptual world, but to me, as an existentialist, I look at that, or I hear that, and I think, well, the concepts and human consciousness are one and the same thing. So are you, because yeah, you basically just are. Let's be clear as to if we're talking about something that is separate from human consciousness, or something that is the same, or at least part of human
Well,
beings,
okay,
human.
then if we're getting into the topic of what is consciousness, that's tough because,
Of course it's tough, but I
yeah,
want to know at least how you're approaching this
okay.
topic. Are you approaching it from, because there's ultimately that binary decision that consciousness is either separate or all one and the same thing.
Okay. Well, in my personal visualization of it, not to say that this is exactly how I see it in all cases, but I see consciousness having levels.
Yeah.
There's closer to the actual perceiver, like what if you ask yourself, if you try to find in your mind what you are, like what is the source of the consciousness that is observing, then you ask yourself what's observing that.
It's infinite regression. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can conceptualize consciousness and look at it, but you're still then if you're trying to define that as consciousness, it gets tough
Yeah.
because for me it's you go a step back further. It's something that is hard if not impossible to regress to. See what I mean? It's always perceiving. It can't perceive itself.
Okay. So I guess
It
we
can
can leave.
conceptualize itself again and again, but
Yeah. So we should just leave, instead of thinking about it in terms of physicality, like, a realm where concepts exist, and then a realm where matter exists, physicality, and then you've got the human
it's
being in
not that
between.
clear a distinction,
Yeah.
but
I
I
know.
do
So
want
it's
to draw that line to some degree, just for the sake of conversation.
okay. Yeah. Just yeah. So it's easier to think about.
Yeah,
But so you're talking about the things that we do and that we don't do, ultimately that leads to a lack of sort of fluidity between these two
yeah.
worlds, these two. So like the conceptual world. So are we talking about meditating here? Is that what you're talking about, or
That's one aspect for sure.
but there's also I guess it's many things. You're talking about meditation, health,
Yeah,
the way we think. So the very manner within which we think. Sorry, I'm kind of tired and I like say some weird, awkward shit. But
no,
so
it's cool.
our methods of thoughts could be part of that, right? Like how if we think critically or not,
Yeah,
if ideas possess us or if we possess ideas. All these sorts of things sort of come together, and those are the things that you want to talk about, right?
yeah,
That composes the human being at the end of the day. And you're saying that there's many things that obviously that we're getting wrong or backwards, or that we could be doing better, so that we could better resonate between that ultimate consciousness sort of conceptual world and reality. Because there is that problem that that is that infinite problem of negative versus positive, stimulation versus asceticism,
yeah.
like how
That's
much.
something we haven't gone into actually. The yeah,
Yeah, but it's true. It's kind of like we're always going towards pleasure and stimulation, but too much of it obviously becomes negative, and not enough of it, well, is also negative. So there's like that fine balance. So
yeah.
you want to talk
It's like
about
saying,
well-being. This could be
yeah,
a way to wrap it all into one word. We're talking about well-being with a train of thought of the human being as a tuning fork.
hmm yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. Just to give another example of what you're talking about, that spectrum of, I like to. I mean, I have a lot of examples, but one is like musicians say a lot of the time, half of the music is the pauses between the notes.
Yeah.
So if you just had notes playing as fast as you could in a constant stream all the time, that would just be tones. It would be, I mean, maybe it could be cool, but you do
Intervals
you
are
need
important. Yeah.
intervals to create that kind of contrast and that timing,
Yeah.
right? Uh,
And if I can add to that, just to solidify that interval importance, Well, you see that in physics, even. You see that in
Yeah,
absolute fundamental physics. There's interval. Time itself seems to have intervals, right?
yeah. It's almost like a binary system.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so to come back to what we were talking about.
Okay, I gotta say something real
Yeah,
quick
sure.
though. Rectify. Time itself probably doesn't have intervals because I don't believe it exists that way. But yeah, that
Okay.
was just a stupid thing that I said.
Well, that's okay. That's another conversation, but
Yeah, it's
um,
another whole other thing. Yeah.
who knows? But
We don't have time to talk about time right now,
yeah.
which doesn't exist. All right,
Okay.
sorry. You keep going. Sorry about
um. Well, shit. So well, I'm not really sure where to go from here. Yeah, basically just something I've been experiencing in my own life and seen in other people's lives is, I mean, I'm big on the health stuff, and I don't really see it the same way as a lot of people do, at least not mainstream allopathic medicine. Not to say that I disagree entirely with their methods, but just changing the way I eat, the way I spend my time, just getting outside more, getting my clothes off more outside, getting like cold showers, breathing well, breathing deeply, working with the alignment of my body, doing all kinds of stuff like that. Um, it made me realize just how much I didn't give a fuck about some of the more existential issues. It's funny enough we're talking like this, but um, it made me have less existential dread in a sense, which I think deep down is a really big issue in our society. This sense that it's all pointless. Where is my life going? Where's reality going? There's no point. Uh, I can do whatever I want, and there's no consequences, which has a double-edged sword, which means also no one cares. Nothing. The reality doesn't give a shit about you. Um, but on the other end, I feel like being in my body more and taking care of it has tapped me into something that makes me relate better to what maybe some of the language that more spiritual people use. Not to say that I'm a proponent of a lot of like new age bullshit, but I understand more like the sense of if I'm doing things right, it really does feel like things were meant to be. You see what I mean? You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, well, I definitely get a sense of urgency from your part because it's true that the faster things are getting in this world and in this time, um, it, we're obviously preoccupied with things of the mind and things of the emotion, things of the spirit. Obviously, that's the discussions we're having, and I guess the body, aside from the whole health craze, vegetarianism, veganism, whatever, carnivore diet, all this kind of stuff. But generally speaking, well-being of the body, so as to be able to have better insight into our spiritual lives and our intellectual lives, is something that's not really being talked about that much. So I get what you're talking about. It's like, yeah, you need to be smart. You need to know how to be wise. You need to know how to live life, and you need to explore philosophical ideas and like Socrates, right? The life not examined is not worth living. But that life is difficult to examine if you're unhealthy physically, and we need to
Yeah.
restore importance in that the temple, so to speak. Yeah,
But it's not just life not examined in the psychological sense. I think it's also
yeah,
life not examined in the physical, like really
that's
experiencing
what
the
I'm
body.
saying.
Yeah,
We need to
exactly.
we need to put that aspect as well, right?
And I mean, I'm looking into taking up certain sports. Like there's something called tricking, which is very acrobatic, gymnastic kind of stuff. And I see these people, and they're so happy with what they're doing because I mean, it's so fulfilling in the sense of like what most people look for in their life. There's an improvement. They constantly experiencing new things. They're pushing limits. They're becoming stronger, more confident in their own selves. And I think I see. It's like just recently. I work at a red light therapy center. It's these devices. It's medically proven to work. So anyone who talks about it not being legit, fuck off. I can debate you for hours on that. But we're working on a client right now who's considering buying some of the machines, and it's an
You cut off
artificial
there for a sec.
intelligence.
He's considering what?
Buying some of the machines, our
Oh, okay.
machines, yeah, for their employees. And it's an artificial intelligence company called Element AI, and you check out their fucking offices. It's insane. The I think their budget for no, not customer, staff and employee satisfaction is like 2 million a year or something like that. They get free beer from 5 to 7. They have like designer coffee, artisanal coffee, and the whole place is designed to look like like have the themes artistically of the neighborhood. Anyways, it's just, I see so much money being funneled into a few major industries such as artificial intelligence, life extension, genetic reengineering. And I mean, I've researched this stuff. This is where like most of the money in the world is getting funneled. It really is. And for me, it's like, I think these things are really cool, but we're rushing towards them way before any of the existential conversations about what the consequences of these things might be, how they might affect our lives. And it's like everyone is so dissatisfied with their lives in the moment. They want to be able to genetically engineer themselves and live forever and be a space god that can upload their brain into a machine and all that kind of stuff, right? The transhumanist stuff. And again, I'm not totally against the transhumanist stuff, but I see it as I see it as, how do I say, juvenile to some degree. I think it could mature into something legitimate, but people are jumping onto it without considering massive consequences that might come along with it. Existential questions is like, what's actually the point? What do you want to do once you're a giant machine that can float through space and exist forever? What, just blow up planets? Like, what are you going to do? Fly around forever? How do you actually want to experience your life? And I find being in the body more makes you realize, like, I don't care if I'm going to die one day. I want to age. I want to get old, but I want to experience that with people in my life who I have a real connection to. It's a completely different value system, and it makes you live in a different way. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, of course. I mean, death is what gives life meaning, and everybody's running towards some kind of immortality, and that definitely brings into question what, purpose and existentialism and all these kinds of things. So I know you want to preserve that and save that, and that's why I think you and I make an interesting sort of couple to argue together. Because if you are more from that side, and I'm more from the side where I like to think about how do we enter that world. So I'm a little
Oh
bit
no,
more.
no, for sure. But
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to do too. It's
but
just,
that's what I'm saying. I think we're both on either side of the fence, but both looking at each other and saying, okay, how do we make a bridge here,
mhm.
right? Because I am super excited into going to the future and thinking about how, how does, morality apply? How does purpose apply? How do people become gods? And how are the gods going to, you know, live? And so how do we prepare ourselves for that kind of stuff? All these questions. But then at the same time, I have to look back and say, well, the the one thing that may very well give gods their true ability to enjoy the fullest, most optimized sort of existence is by preserving, a lot of the tenets and the structures of the past, or at least what will become the past, which is our vulnerability physically and emotionally and mentally, our, need for death, our, need for very biological sort of like processes, if you will. So that would encompass eating food, having sex, getting into fights and arguments and satisfying your darkest urges as well. So like how to keep that Apollonian versus Dionysus dynamic that Nietzsche was so
Yeah.
fond of alive for when we become gods, quote unquote. Um, so like I get what you're talking about, man, and it's like I feel as if though it let's get down to real brass tacks and really think about what that means though to transfer consciousness up to a computer. People think that's like possible on the level where they can preserve their ego, and it's not that simple whatsoever. And in fact, I believe that the chances are actually highly improbable that your egotistic self will somehow transfer over to another medium. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
you
even if
can't
we were
just
to
take out your brain and that is you. There's
yeah,
there's
like
a whole system at
yes,
work.
but I mean without the brain, because even the brain, I think,
Yeah.
well, I guess in that manner. But here's the thing: is like you said, we're more complex than that. The brain isn't. You don't. You're not human necessarily just because your brain is still there.
Well,
If
we
your
have a
brain is
whole
sustained, I mean, yeah, like how much of you do you replace before you become not you at the very least? And this is a question that we have yet to answer. But it's definitely not. Oh, if your brain is intact, that's you. Do you know what I mean? It's still you. Because just by virtue of your body being replaced by mechanical parts, you're not fully you in the same context that you're able to talk about it today. So, um,
Well, you know, it's an
but
interesting fact.
having
Can I just make one point to make
yeah,
to ground this? Is It's funny because it's not even talked about that much in actual medical communities, but it's well known that people who have heart transplants often have personality changes. But
yeah,
it's because we have a massive neural network in our hearts and our guts as well, which
yeah.
have
Well, I
information
gotta
processing that it exchanges
No, no, I
information
know,
all the
but
time.
I gotta admit it's a very difficult one because I mean after having such an invasive kind of operation, you're bound to change your personality in one way or another,
Oh no,
right?
but
Like,
there's some freakish shit. Like people who like were like desk
this,
jockeys
yeah,
taking up dance, and it turns out that the heart person was someone who liked to party a lot. That kind of shit.
yeah,
There
okay.
are
It's
thousands, there's
plausible.
millions
It's
of recorded.
plausible
Oh
for
no,
sure.
sorry, not
But where I
millions.
was getting at is that
Thousands of recorded cases of that.
if we can really establish that ego might not actually transfer. What you might have is just a sort of virtual copy of your personality that's just reproducing,
Yeah,
to the exact T who
so it's
you
not you
are,
at all.
but it's not actually you at all. Exactly. So let's just look at it from that perspective to begin with, right? And then we can explore the possibility of actually, yeah, no, you can preserve your ego indefinitely, and have like omnipotent powers or whatever, right? Um, so looking at it from the standpoint that's more, let's say, probable, which is that like that your ego won't transfer over. You might have some part of your ego that's indefinite, right? Like I said, if we can sort of decode the neural synapses of a brain, and it can sort of continue the same patterns, into a new medium like a computer, whatever. But we're obviously, what we care about is us, is our ego, how we feel, right?
Our
not
consciousness.
not what we would become or whatever. Exactly, our consciousness. God knows, that's sort of like an ironic
Well, this comes back to
pun.
Plato's ideas of logos, the essence.
Yeah, the essence. But so how do we link that to what you were saying? Basically, you were
Um,
saying that.
well, okay, there's a lot that I was saying, but
But we were trying to link that back to. We were basically trying to link that back to, if if your ego. Okay, that's right. How do we become gods? Well, um, so having established that we won't necessarily be able to transfer the ego, and that's ultimately what people want. That I'm sure, and actually we
yeah,
might not even have a choice, but that we have to merge the two, become a sort of biosynthetic entity, right? Which is we're already becoming. I mean, people on their phones everywhere. I mean, I'm looking around
yeah,
me because there's
it's
people on
definitely
their phones.
affecting our spines.
exactly. But the point is we're already biosynthetic. We already. I mean, think about it this way. You know,
But it's not
no
us. We
no
you
more than
put
10
down the
years
phone
ago.
and run off into the forest,
Let's
and
say
you're not
let's say
a
15
biosynthetic
years
creature.
ago. Yeah, but let's say 10, 15 years ago, you had to go to the computer
Yeah.
in a room to plug yourself into this virtual world and do things, right? Then we had smartphones, so now this virtual world is on us all the time. But you see this pattern; it's going to continue going. I mean, eventually it'll end up inside us, and already we've talked about it. It's called the neural link or neural lace, which is a project that one of Elon Musk's companies is sort of working on, which is to literally just create an interface between humans and computers, right? And
Which
this
I mean,
interface is with the purpose of doing what? Of creating an input-output sort of like bandwidth that is much faster than two thumbs, typing, on your tablet or on your phone. So if you're connected directly via the brain, whether that's with sort of like nanotechnology or an actual sort of like electrode type system that's in your brain or not, it's clear that it's going to become more and more sophisticated. And then, um, you know, ultimately speaking, we will be different. We will no longer be human as we are
okay,
today.
that's to say if people actually all
Dude,
take this up.
no, but trust me, it doesn't matter whether all people or not. If it's just one human being on the planet that does this, it is an issue to
Oh, for
be
sure.
looked at, right? And
Oh,
it's
yeah, no, I
important
agree.
because
I agree with that.
there's if one person does it, guaranteed that it's a transition that has started and that it will continue into the future. And
Of course.
we got to think about the future, not even beyond our own lives, right? Like what's this going to mean for humanity, or what's this going to mean for life in the universe in general, right? This is why I'm not opposed necessarily to this, because I see it more of like an evolutionary thing. We evolved from sort of like a chemical, you know um, constituencies or whatever you want to call it, and we've evolved
Well,
into biological beings, and then who knows, maybe the next evolution in life is a mechanical, like a biomechanical or a biosynthetic or whatever you want to call it. So
I will.
but I think
I'll
way
just
far in the
throw.
future, right? So but how do we do that while preserving, because like I said, if all we do is go straight from having interfaced humans and computers to trying to find a way to just, or maybe just computers take over altogether, how do we preserve consciousness as it is, not as it could become in a
We can't.
simulated manner, right? With
Can't.
health, with the health in mind of that we're talking about, with the humanity, the essence that we want to preserve, that you're talking about, right?
I think that phones are already intervening with that humanity and that whole holistic health. I don't think that as soon as you integrate a neural lace, it's over. I don't think. Uh, I might get some flack for this, but just the concept of EMF, which is now medically accepted as being an issue, it's just there's debate over how much of an issue it is. But if you introduce an electrical system into the body, it's going to have an effect. I mean, like there's pacemakers already, and a lot of the time people get neural issues. It has shown to actually make the heart muscle stronger, which is cool with the electrical impulses, but it often damages the neural system as well. If we introduce a neural lace into the body, I'm terrified of what might happen. People on their phones, how much it affects the ocular system and the connection to the brain. Uh, I mean, this is already making us less human. It's disconnecting us from our direct environment and throwing us into an
Well,
abstract world of concepts through the phone.
but here's what I'm thinking though, as like I said, it's not about becoming less human, it's about becoming better humans, right? Like,
Okay.
obviously we've always, because you could go back 500 years, like let's say Gutenberg press, right? Like as soon as that came out, I'm sure that some people said, well, this is more of like godlike powers, you know what I mean? This is no longer human.
Well, I thought it
um
was the devil at first.
huh?
They thought it was the devil at first.
The devil or
Yeah.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
but technology tends to have that effect. It's like, well, we're less human with this, but it does amplify our humanity in other ways. So technically it gives us a greater sensibility as to be human. It's just that it's out of whack and that
I
it
agree.
takes some time for it to settle, right? So,
Well, I don't know if it ever does.
well, no, maybe it doesn't, but well, it does for certain things, right? Like obviously, phones used to be a big problem, and still are in many ways, but I don't think they will be much longer
Why not?
because, like I said, because of that interface. If you can connect with anybody in real detail, you know, like 3D, there it's the to you it's all the same. You're not there in the flesh, but to you it's all the same. Then you're increasing your human sensibilities. You're able to connect with more people. Even perhaps you're gonna be able to develop the ability to do. I wouldn't say go as far as say have two conversations at once, but definitely do several things that we can't imagine right now because we don't have the capacity to. But do several things at once that that humans would be all the better for it, and it would be like a greater human sensibility for having that extra sense or that extra ability. It's a strange thing, but how do we preserve? You know, like for example, you know, I have a greater ability to, let's say, get laid or, you know, meet a potential partner because of Tinder, right? Or Bumble or whatever app that people use now for to get laid, right? Now that gives me the opportunity, but it doesn't actually give me the sensibility, right? It's like, okay, well, I can meet these people, but because you're going and you're meeting them and you're just going straight for the stimulation kind of impulse thing and just having sex with a stranger here, sex with a stranger there, swipe, 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 swipe in between, you know, you have a greater opportunity, but the sensibility doesn't come with it. That's something you have to work at, you know what I mean? So, for example, like I used to do the whole swipe, 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 you know, try to have sex with the person and leave, like when I was much younger. But obviously now I'm you know, my hormones are released a little bit, you know, it's calmed down. I'm getting older, I'm getting more sensible, and I realize, no, I actually want to talk to these people. So when I do go on a Tinder date, most of the time, let's say like, and actually don't go that often, but I did the most this summer, because I was in a new city, and out of the 6 or 7 Tinder dates that I got, I think I only had sex with like 2 or 3 of them, and the other 4, one of them were like a bad date, and the other 3 went really great. It was just like we just sort of talked and got to know each other. We used it. We used the interface of an online app to meet and to talk and to get to know each other. So, like I said, it's just a matter of bringing using the opportunity and the possibility and transforming it into a sensibility. That's the struggle of our generation now.
I don't know, man. I think you're still losing something. I think you're losing that
Oh, yeah, you
drive
are.
to go out and
Of course you are.
like actually you know, like see someone in the street and approach them. That's something that
Yeah.
is going to be lost forever. That
Yeah, but
ability,
if
if
you're
that's the way
seeing
you go.
someone in a virtual world, right, and in fact, like I said, you have the ability to do more or have more of a human sensibility because, like, say I can meet someone in Japan right now because I can digitally sort of like travel there, and I meet this new person. Now, how do you measure? Does the ability to try something new and experience a new culture, a new mentality, complete different from yours at an instant? Does that outweigh you being able to go out in your neighborhood and just you know, connect with someone that has a very similar culture, same old thing? Like, you know what I
I
mean? Like,
think
I
so.
can go out in Moncton and be like, okay, well, you know, any of the questions that I ask the person, I can sort of half expect what they're going to tell me, just based on them being in a smaller town and this being the culture, right? So, like I said, how do you measure these things? How do you outweigh them?
Yeah, but you need that experience. You need to get bored of your town to change it.
Dude, I think I'm talking really loud again. Sorry,
Okay.
you gotta check me on that
I don't know.
because
I can't tell. But I think you need to be able to get bored of your town to change it. Like I think that all the problems in the world are necessary pain points. They're signals for something to happen. It's not things that we have to avoid. That's the whole issue in the first place. We keep trying to bypass the realities. You you see what I'm getting at?
yeah, I know. Like I said, I think it's an issue of not bypassing the realities. That's what we have to try to do with these
Yeah.
new abilities and where we're headed, because it's inevitable, right? Like, dude, you can't, as much as I would love to, but we can't champion the cause of eliminating all phones and no connection to the internet. Only,
That's not
you
what
know,
I'm saying.
I know, but what I'm saying is that, well, what I'm basically saying then is I don't know where you're going. Right? What do
Um,
you want?
well, I'm just trying to help whoever's listening realize that maybe those things aren't actually going to give you what you're looking for. At least that's been my experience. Going as soon as I've deleted Tinder, that's when I started actually doing things and meeting people that things have worked out with. Sure, I
Yeah,
met a few people through Tinder and it was great.
yeah.
Some of it
The,
not
this,
so great. Plenty of it not
and
so great. But
and you're right, right. But like I said, it's like I think you'll get what you want not by relying on the technology.
yeah,
But that doesn't mean that we have to solve the problem by going backwards in time
no, not
and
at all,
without the
not at all.
technology. We need to find a balance, right? We
But
need to find a balance.
exactly. But again, that's why I talk about how just like what the balance of the economy is. I guess the more we value these transhumanist ideals, the more a massive amount of our resources is getting pooled into that. When I think that we could still develop those things, but take our time about it and use a lot of those resources to do things that would do a lot, like much better things that would make us way happier with the way we are already. You see what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure, yeah. I I think it's absolutely necessary to do that, like I said. Um, but I'm not so certain that the ability to do it is going to increase. It's kind of like yeah, there was a wave of people getting off social media for a while. I think there was a few people who had sort of
Especially
influenced
Facebook.
that decision. There's a couple of things that Facebook did that was kind of fucked up, and then there was like a sort of like fad where people were like, "Yeah, I deleted my Facebook account." So you did too? Yeah, I did too. You know, it's like, and
Yeah.
people kind of like rejoiced, but almost for like the wrong reasons. You know, it was like more of like an ego trip. Like, see, like I'm cool enough that I don't need social media. But like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, and Jaron Lanier, the quote unquote, creator of virtual reality. I don't know why he's dubbed that, um, but he's definitely a grandfather of it. Like he definitely sort of like started building the virtual like means for virtual reality. So that I give him credit for. But as a concept, I just don't want people to get that idea in their heads that Jaron Lanier sort of invented virtual reality as a concept.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but he also is an advocate for that. As much as you're gonna love this guy. He's totally a tech guy. He's totally a futurist in a sense, and he's the one saying, guys, like we need to get off of social media. It's evil. You know what I mean? And
All
like
right.
in but not, but get off of this kind of social media platform. Um, so
No, I think social media has its uses for sure. It's
no,
just
it
like,
does. But he envisions a better sort of social media and a better internet, and so you should listen to his talks. He's very good. But
but
so
I think we have to stop relying on better technologies and better mediums to come out and more learn how to do things ourselves. You know what I mean? If we keep waiting for technologies to improve our lives, then we keep making ourselves weaker and becoming more dependent on
no,
something
you're
outside of
right.
ourselves.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is we need to bring back a lot of the like conventional, traditional sort of like ways of living that is part of being a human being, and couple them with
Yeah,
an amelioration of the current technology that we have.
exactly.
Not look towards the better technology because that's inevitable. Like I said, progress is inevitable.
Yeah,
So we don't need to worry about
just I
that. We
want
need
a
to
different
worry
kind
about
of
what we have
progress.
now. Exactly. What we have now and how do we make it better? And also how, what do we need to eliminate in our lives? What do we need to add to our lives? So obviously we need to add more human interactions, real world human sort of like, what I mean, interactions. And then better the interactions that we are having in this sort of virtual world that is becoming the be all end all apparently,
And
right?
and what I was getting at in the first place is a better understanding of our bodies. That's a point I made on Facebook before we talked about this. Here is it's funny to me that empirical culture, atheistic culture, modern culture criticizes Christianity and most religions, yet they both have a kind of anti biology perspective, anti-body. Like we want to break free of the body. We want to connect to the
Yeah,
singularity and change ourselves genetically and all that.
yeah,
When I understand that the medical field, the way it's portrayed these days, it makes it seem pretty bleak. Oh, you have your genetic robot and you're stuck getting your parents' diseases and all that. But there's a lot of alternative perspectives, and through my personal experience, I've seen that a lot of them are real. There's a lot of bullshit, of course,
yeah.
too. But
But that's an interesting parallel that you're drawing. Yuval
yeah,
Harari actually talks about that in a sense. Is that Christianity is literally just like a sort of primitive, primal form of virtual reality as it is today. It's like it's a
yeah,
game.
yeah.
It's literally a game. It's kind of like, well, you know, say for example, if you have a certain amount of prayers and a certain amount of acts that you have to do within this game, that it allows you to go on to the next level, right? So yes, there is a disregard for the body and a disregard for this life as it is. That is the problem with religion. You're deferring to an afterlife, and this is because of the problem of purpose and absurdity, of course, right? But
Well, I do see
the
where it's rooted,
parallels,
but yeah,
the parallels are the same. Like you take virtual reality and technology and all this kind of stuff versus religion. They're both sort of like the same sort of vehicles for a higher ideal. But I think what just sort of, which is interesting, is that the more we press into this world, the more people are, it's going to work itself out in your favor, in the sense that you're trying to achieve, because the more we do disregard our bodies, as we're doing right now. Like I see a sort of future event, kind of like that movie Surrogate that Bruce Willis did. Not the best movie in the world, but it had some interesting concepts. Anyway, it's kind of like, what do we do at work now? We live in virtual worlds 8 hours a day in general, right? A massive part of the workforce goes to work in the virtual world. They sit there on their computers. Well, what happens when you do actually sit at home in like a sort of pod, and you sort of live a virtual world
our
that's
bodies are going to rebel.
exactly, our bodies
Yeah,
are going to rebel, and therefore we're either going to do one of two things or both. But some people are going to say, okay, well, we need a good, healthy balance between how we live in the virtual world and how we take care of our bodies here, or they're going to change the body so as to
yeah,
be able to handle that kind of thing, right?
yeah.
And like I said, once you go down that road, changing the body, are you going to do it biologically or mechanically or both?
And
Right? Are you
again,
going to sustain the body with like nanotechnology and like CRISPR-Cas9 type stuff, genetic engineering, so the body can handle more stress or less activity or whatever? Do you know what I mean? Or are you going to just literally try to you know transplant brains into a vat, and like some people are going to live that way? They're like, cool, give you one last hug with my corporal body, and for the rest of my life, you're just gonna have to see me on the screen.
yeah,
We don't
I'll
know how it's
just
gonna
be
work out.
jizzing my pants off in Rainbow Land,
Yeah, that's
24/7.
yeah,
Well,
that's
I think it wasn't long ago that some parents neglected their baby and the baby starved because
yeah.
they were
And
stuck in
that
virtual
was in
virtual
in
porn.
Korea or something like that. Yeah, but you
Yeah,
know what I mean. Here's the thing, though. Even if it gets to that point where people are like, okay, I just fuck this world, put me into this sort of thing. The mind, the ego, as long as the mind is still there, you're not escaping purpose. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, how they say you can't run away from your problems. Wherever you go physically, you
yeah,
take your problems with you. That is especially true if people go into like a sort of like brain vat, and like all the necessary electrical impulses are stimulated at the right time. I still believe that the essence of consciousness cannot handle lack of purpose, and if you expedite life. So that's what happens when you live in virtual worlds. Things get a lot faster. You're able to experience and stimulate yourself on a basis that's a lot faster at will. And so
yeah.
what happens when you do that? Well, you start running out of buffer. It becomes a matter of time, because over a shorter amount of time, you're going to get a lot more sort of like insane and unhealthy and
Well, it's going to
neurotic.
overfire the dopamine receptors, and that's already
Exactly.
we're already seeing that with social media. People
Yeah,
are getting burnt out dopamine receptors, and they
yeah.
just get permanently depressed because of it.
No, exactly.
And that's what I'm saying is like it's the same thing as I was talking about with phones earlier. The next step is Neuralink, and then I mean, well, with social media, next step virtual reality. We're already burnt out. We're already fucked up. And I understand that in some ways it has improved things enormously, but like we got to gauge it. Like now they're trying to roll out 5G networks, and I'm not going to talk about the health aspect of that, but it's like, come on, my internet's fine. Why are you putting money into this? They 5G antennas, they don't even the towers, they don't even go that far. So they have to set thousands of them up everywhere without very much
Uh,
distance in between. It's going to cost a lot of money, but they still want to do it with the excuse, the reasoning that we will get faster internet. I don't give a shit. My internet's fine. I'm
yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
but like
Yeah, that's just a manifestation of what you're talking about, right? The
exactly.
desire for something better, but you're sort of fucking yourself over by shooting yourself in the foot. But let's talk about actual, like, sort of like remedies here, right? Now we've established the problem. How do we do that? How do you, robot biosynthetic gods, if you will, sort of like, how do they live healthy? How do we do that? So I think obviously philosophy is part one. Um, you know,
Metaphysics, self-awareness.
and then, but physical body wise, that's your domain, right?
Well,
How would you see, like, how would you envision a world where, let's say, because we're already, let's say, 2/3 of our lives is spent in the virtual world. We're getting there. Two thirds on average. So how do we do it now?
now, okay.
Yeah, how do we
Well,
do it?
I mean, just at work, during your lunch break, go for a 10-minute walk outside, get in the sun, make sure that there's some sun in your eyes. I mean, don't stare at the sun directly, but just some you need some of that signal. You need some of that circadian signal. You need your body to be able to be aware of that. At night, in the evening, dim the lights. You can download a program called Iris on laptops. It turns the screen red and it stops the flicker rate. Light signals day to day are incredibly important. Every cell in your body has a receptor called melanopsin, and there's also cytochrome C oxidase that pick up on light signals. And um, everything is regulated by your circadian cycle. There's a suprachiasmatic nucleus in your eyes. You have body clocks. So
Yeah,
basically, in the morning, ideally, you want to get outside, get some sun in on your face and your eyes. And at the end of the day, you want to dim all the lights. You want to eat locally. You want to eat foods that are grown locally, fresh, and seasonally. I mean, I didn't think this would turn into a health podcast at
no,
this point, but
no. Let me prod you a little bit deeper, because this is
yeah,
all stuff that people can figure out for themselves. Obviously, it's like, get off the fucking laptop or phone or whatever it is and do these things. But like, I mean, like, how do you get people to use, like, so for example, I would say, well, you know, if we use people's intellectual curiosities, right? And it's kind of like, well, why does someone play a video game? Well, if we can, using the video game or using the virtual platforms, to install in them the desire to go out in the real world, I think that would be a much better way of getting these people to do these healthy things. So, for example, the intellectual
okay,
dark web movement is kind of doing it right now. Like, you're getting guys like Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, the Weinsteins, anybody who has a show anyway, like Ben Shapiro. What do, right? They stimulate people online. They say, here's a podcast, here's my YouTube show, here's what I'm talking about. Oh, and by the way, I'm coming to your city. And then you're getting guys like Jordan Peterson, who's filling up stadiums as if he was like a pop star, right?
mm-hmm.
5,000 seat type theaters. So how do you do that on a more frequent level, on a more sort of like regular basis, with social media and with apps and all this kind of stuff?
I mean, that's the marketer's domain at that point. Is how do you go viral? Say something controversial, or be a university professor and oppose Bill 6C whatever. And
Yeah.
I mean, what am I supposed to say at that point? Do what you
That's all
can
that's
in
it.
your life here and now. Like that's
Yeah.
I take care of myself, number one. I do these things that I mentioned and a lot more, and I talk about it. That's all I can do for now, and maybe it'll attract an audience. Hopefully,
Yeah.
it does. But there's other people, there are other influencers talking about similar things. Check out Primal Edge Health people; they're great
Yeah.
on YouTube. But
I think the online platform just needs to become a platform of connection that allows us to create more events, because like it's obvious that we're still new into this technology, right? It's only been 10, like 15, let's say 20 years, let's say a solid 20 years of online. So it's kind of like a kid with a new toy. It's like, well, I want to play with a toy, and that's all I'm doing for the next like 5 days, and then they get bored of it, and that's it, right? They never do it again. But obviously, we're not talking about a simple kid with a simple toy. We're talking about humanity with this amazing technology that allows us to do things. So it's going to take a while before we sort of get bored of it, right? And become human again. So in the meantime, how do we sort of like transition back into is what I was talking about, right? Is we need to turn this platform into a way for us to actually get out there and live our lives as human beings. It's like there's like apps like Meetup. I don't know if you ever downloaded Meetup, but like it's an app on your phone,
I
and it's
know of
like
it.
you have like book clubs, you have cyclists, you have like joggers, whatever, different things, and people can just meet up and go and do these things, right? Um, I think more people should create stuff like that. More people should have podcasts. More people should have social media that encourages sort of like group meets and community
Then
type
we can
oriented
finally get
events.
some guests on here.
Yeah, well, that would be
That'd
great,
be
right?
great.
Like if someone says, "Cool, I'm in Montreal," or "Oh, I'm going to be in Germany," I know that's where you guys are, and then they come and they meet with us, and we can have like a sort of, I mean, more
Yeah,
people
no.
should be doing that, right?
Well,
Because they're
I
already
think
people want to
we're doing the
connect.
right thing right now.
Yeah, like people connect all the time. They it's not for lack of a desire. I mean, when people are playing Fortnite and all these new fucking video games, I have no idea what it's all about anymore because I don't play video games. But anyway, they connect. They talk to other people. They don't want to play with a
Yeah.
bot. No, you know what I mean? Like it's not fucking Pac-Man. They want to talk to other and like cooperate and do all these things, right? And these virtual worlds. We just have to stimulate their desire to do it in the real world. That's all.
Hmm. Well, that's tough because online you can get a sense of gratification a lot easier, especially in video games
Yeah,
and
but
in
it's
real life.
cheap.
Yeah,
It's
it's
cheap, and
cheap.
obviously, these people still have the one big problem, and it's that you still have to go out in the real world and fucking deal with it. You know.
And it's tough at
So
first.
yeah,
I mean, it's always tough.
yeah. Well,
But
let's
I
not
mean,
talk about Adjan. I mean, that's. I mean, I know this sounds cynical, but it's almost like these guys are fucking lost cause. But like that's a whole other issue entirely. That has to do with education, right? Like they should not have the access to it to begin with. And for those who already have access, well, we need treatment centers for them. It's that bad. It's that bad. You see a
oh,
kid in an iPad
there
and the
are
parent takes it away
yeah.
for a second and they fucking yell their heads off as if they got like their foot cut off or something.
Well, no, there are countries. There are whole countries like I think China, definitely Japan. They have actual detox centers, so to
Yeah,
speak, for
but
this
here's
kind
the
of
thing.
stuff.
It's not just detox centers. They also have, like it's
Rehabilitation.
well, here's the thing. They also have negative incentives. Like, oh,
Yeah,
here's a sort of currency kind of system, and then you don't
there's that
benefit if
too.
you
Yeah,
buy too many video games, and there's certain things you won't be able to do. Like that's super Orwellian and not in a good direction.
I know. I'm just saying that there are entire countries that recognize the issue. Not to
Yeah.
say that they're doing everything right. Not even close.
No, no, but yeah, I mean, it's like Asia has that big problem, right? It's like, well, fuck, you know. Um, People are literally dying from internet addiction and gaming and all this kind of shit.
Yeah. I think it was a while ago. It was like StarCraft days when the first kid who just died from playing video games for I think 3 days straight didn't get up or anything. He just died on the spot.
Yeah, stasis, atrophy. This is some serious shit, man. Like when you're sitting at the computer for so long that you develop atrophy over a few years
And
time.
I know people are going to call me a spook for talking about this, but EMF and blue light affecting, like, intense blue light from screens is a real biological factor. It really is. And fuck off, people who keep hating on that. Look it up. Look at the actual studies. Go on PubMed. Go to the actual sources of studies that even doctors follow, and just look at the ones that they're not looking at. It's all there.
Yeah, but it's common sense, dude. I edited a film a couple summers ago. Or is it last summer? Anyway, yeah, a couple summers. Anyway, I edited a film for 2 days, for 48 hours in a weekend that I put in, just sitting in front of my computer editing a film together, rough cut. And I went cross-eyed for 4 days, cross-eyed. So
That's unfortunately kind of funny, but that.
But the thing is like, obviously you stare into a screen, stare at anything. You know, if you read a book,
That's true. Yeah, of course.
all you're doing is reading books. Your eyesight's going to go bad after a while. If you're just reading too. It's about excess. All right, it's common sense, not just the blue light which is a factor as well, but it's the excess.
No, exactly. I'm saying it's a factor, but like, I mean, there's studies that are like 15 years old looking at students under xenon blue lights versus incandescent bulbs, and the kids under xenon lights, which is blue intense spectrum, they have more of them fall asleep. They have lower grades. They complain more. All that kind of stuff. They get more bone problems, bone density problems. Anyways, but yeah, just to
deteriorate for sure. We're not meant to live our lives this way. It kind of reminds me of that movie Office Space from like 1990.
I love that movie.
96 or 98, whatever. You know, when he's like, we're not meant to live this way, Michael. Human beings were not meant to stare in front of screens 8 hours a day. I don't know if you know what the speech was. It was really funny.
I know.
Yeah.
And yeah, so what the quest is now to change our very natures.
Well, I think it's kind of like, I don't even know what we should entitle this podcast, because we're definitely talking about health, and like it's sort of like the transhumanist health. That's the topic. Transhumanist health.
Retaining our humanity in the singularity, something like that. I don't know, but these are huge questions. And
health for the transhuman. Is that what we're dubbing this?
I guess health for the transhumanist.
Yeah.
But I mean, okay. I guess a big part of this conversation that we've been glossing over is the question of, like, do we have an essence that is intangible, a consciousness or something, or a logos that we can't bring over into a machine, that we can't inherently change? It's like the question of, are you still you when you're a baby and when you're 40 years old? Is that the same person? But I mean, because every one of your cells is changed at that point. It's different matter, but you have the memories. What is that about them? Is there anything at all? And that comes into, I mean, a lot of that conversation comes into determinism, and if free will exists. Are we just the chemicals that make us up, and those reactions? And are you basically not the same person from 1 year to the next? Or is there something that maybe it is like a I don't want to, because when you talk about like the spirit, the soul, then people are like, okay, you're immediately going esoteric. But who knows? Maybe there's like a type of frequency that exists there, like because there's the quantum electrodynamic field, there's the electromagnetic field that we have that reaches out very far around the body. Maybe it's that. I don't know. I'm just saying that there are energies that are invisible, that are quantifiable through scientific methods. Maybe there's one that we haven't discovered yet that is the soul, or maybe it's something that we can pick up on. Anyways, is there something that we can't change about ourselves that we could tap into? I through my personal experience, it very much feels that way, and the more I live by that, the more I see it. So it's a very subjective thing, unfortunately.
We are. We're taking a sort of individualistic approach, right? It's like, but does it even fucking matter? I mean, as a human being, like as an individual, right? In the overall context of things, if I'm gonna get a bit sort of spiritual woo-woo here, but like, you know, obviously humanity is an organism in itself, composed of
Sorry, I just have to call you out for like doing this right now when you
yeah,
go woo woo.
woo-woo,
Yeah.
the
I mean, the hand
woo-woo.
gestures are great. It's just
Yeah, but I like to dramatic. I come
yeah,
from
yeah,
a
yeah.
film
It's cool.
background. Anyway, so like as much as I am many parts of a whole because I'm composed of organs and composed of cells that are composed of molecules that are composed of atoms and so on and so forth, right? But ultimately speaking, going upwards, I am part of an organism, of a community, of a species, of a life, of ultimately of the universe, of existence, right? I am a part of a whole. So I don't know if, let's even start there with that question. Does it even matter? Should we want to preserve that? Regardless, if I look at it in terms of just being the whole instead of just being the part, the small minuscule part. Ultimately, there's no question to be asked, right? And this is what I'm trying to establish is I think people need to have a healthy relationship between who they are as individuals and who they are as the whole, regardless of the whole encompassing a deity or not. All is for one for all, like everything is one. That seems to be recurring across all spectrums of thought and belief, right? Whether you're a theoretical physicist or whether you're a fundamentalist, you know, Jew or Christian or, Muslim, people tend to believe that everything is one. It's all there, existence, encompassed.
Okay.
So I think we should try to make the link between whether us as human beings living healthily and being, you know, optimized for our lives as an organism, you know, I think is more. We need to find out that link. It's not about just being fully great as the individual. It's about just being great as part of the whole. And how do we do that in practical terms? That's
Well, I
the
mean
tough part.
that comes back to utilitarianism versus what was it? Populism or individualism? Anyways.
Yeah, well, obviously, it's not. It's we always think of things in extremes and counterbalances, but we need a gradient. We need to
Yeah.
expose a gradient and act out a gradient. We need
Well,
balance.
okay, because you're talking about thinking about this in a conceptual sense, but what I'm talking about is living it. Like
Yeah,
by
practical.
by by integrating into your body, you become more aware of where you are here and now.
Yeah,
Who are the people you spend your time with? Who are the people they spend their time with? And then that's the connection, right?
yeah,
And you find those balances. And so by becoming more centered, you find your place in the web more clearly. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah,
You become
yeah.
more aware of the web because you actually are seeing through your eyes as opposed to through your conceptual third eye or whatever your
Yeah, I know.
imagination.
Yeah, I mean, like in simple terms, whether you meditate or whether you sort of like actualize yourself, these are two different methods. Maybe you need both to achieve this sort of connection with the community or the one or whatever you want to call it, as the individual. Obviously, in practical terms, it becomes difficult when you're talking about specific things, right? Like that's the problem with societies, right, and communities, right? It's like on an individual level, the Eastern philosophies have that down pat. Buddhism, Taoism, Shintoism, whatever you want to call it, the isms of the East, they optimized well-being for the individual. But as soon as you go outside the individual, it breaks down. How do you,
I don't
you
know if
know,
I agree with you that
well,
the
not
East has
completely,
it
but
worked
I
out,
mean,
but
but what I'm trying to say is that on a small scale, these kinds of philosophies and ways of being and actualizing yourself, they work very well for you, ultimately speaking, but it doesn't deal with, day-to-day issues necessarily. Like you can't from meditation, for example,
I'm not talking about
set up a
meditation, though.
I
You
know
know
what
that.
I'm trying to say is you can't. I'm talking about individualism, right? Meditation as an example of being individualistic. You can't set up a hierarchical political structure based on meditation because meditation is reserved for the individual. That doesn't translate into community very well, and this is why you have all these problems with the East, right? They had the communists, Mao Zedong, and all this kind of stuff in the 20th century. China, and even though they're on an individual level great, but then on the West, it's like the opposite effect, right? You have structure, but that structure doesn't allow for the optimization of the well-being of the individual. This is why you're seeing a lot of like Christians doing Buddhism and like the Chinese getting into Western kind of like methodologies and philosophies and ways of thought, or at least ways of acting out their lives. It's like a mixture of both, right? Um, and so I think we're ultimately moving towards that balance. But how do we do it as the individual? How do you decide? Okay, I want to better balance my life between my individualistic sort of self and my communal self.
Well, I don't see how they clash personally.
Well, I'm not saying they clash. I'm saying it's difficult to establish a gradient between the two, to establish balance between the two.
I don't know.
Because, like I said, one deals with the individual exclusively, one deals with community exclusively, and neither of them really balance the two out.
Well,
This is
no,
why,
because if I take care of myself better, then I don't need as much help from the people around me, and I have more ability to help the people around me.
yeah, but here's the thing: to take care of yourself better, you're going to need the things of the people around you.
How
Do you know
so?
what I mean?
Not
Okay,
necessarily.
so give me an example of how you would take care of yourself better.
I'd be outside more. I would work harder. I would
You would
put my
eat,
resources into things that are less
yeah,
based on
but
short-term pleasures and more.
what are you going to eat? What are you going to eat? Where are you going to go? Let's just start with those two things, right?
Hmm. Okay. Well, I'm going to eat my healthy meat, my local meat, the bought from
Healthy meat.
farmers. I'm supporting local.
Exactly. You
Okay.
just said it. Farmers. You rely on
Yeah.
farmers to get your healthy meat. It's like I said. There's a communal
But no,
aspect in
I'm not.
it.
But I'm not leeching on them. I'm exchanging resources. I'm helping them.
Yeah. Yes. The point is, there's a social connection there. You
Okay.
can't be an individual on your own and just not because you said right. I won't need other people if I
No,
take care
I'm
of
saying
myself.
I don't need to. I don't need to leech off of other people.
No, you don't need to leech, but you still
Yeah.
need other people,
Yeah. Okay. Well,
right?
that is a good
And,
distinction, but
and
that's not what I'm saying at all.
no, yeah, but that's the point. Is that you need other people, and
Yeah,
so
for sure.
and so like
I'm not saying anything
yeah, well,
against
that's
that.
how societies are constructed, right? Like you don't need other people. Ultimately speaking, you could be out there surviving, like an animal in nature, but obviously we're human beings. I'm reading the social contract right now, and
Okay.
it makes a lot of sense. But the point
But
is, we solidify, you know, community. That's how we ultimately gain our freedom is by
but
submitting freedom. It's a weird paradox, but like we submit.
no, not at all. Because if I'm improving my community, then I'm improving myself. I don't see the
Yeah,
difference.
yes.
Yeah.
That's the point. There is no difference
Yeah.
because
So I'm not
because
sacrificing anything.
yes, you are. You're
No,
sacrificing
it's what I
your
want to do. It's
yeah,
what I
exactly.
deep down as an individual want.
Yes, it's in your interest to do that. So that's why you want to do it. Like I said, you submit a,
No, because I
a
care. I see it as part of me.
yes, of course it's part of you and you're part of it. That's what I'm trying to say is
Yeah.
that established social contract that Jean-Jacques Rousseau sort of like crystallized is the manifestation of you giving up a certain amount of freedom for ultimately a greater amount of freedom. It's
But
kind
I
of
don't
like
see it as giving up any freedom because it's exactly what I want to do. It
no,
is freedom.
exactly. It's freedom and it's freedom. You're giving away your naturalistic freedom for sovereign freedom. That's how he explains it.
Okay.
So
I
you're
don't know.
giving away a certain amount of, yes, because by living in a society, you adhere to the rules, that the sovereignty has decided, which is the commune, which is the democracy, everybody, right?
Hmm.
You live by the rules. You don't say, well, yeah, I want to park in this spot and I'm not supposed to, but I'm going to do it anyway because I reserve my naturalistic freedoms. No, you can't reserve your naturalistic freedoms and be a part and benefit from the sovereign freedoms that you gain from it, right? And so you ultimately speaking, you do submit your naturalistic freedoms for sovereign freedom. It's literally being you're forced into freedom. That's it's like a way that he put it, which is very interesting. But the
The
point
concept
is,
of freedom itself is pretty weird.
yeah, it's a well, you have to include freedom, from the fundamental levels, so as to understand the higher levels,
You
and
know,
that's what.
if you want to exist, then you're
Yeah.
not free
No,
because
exactly.
you're an individual as opposed to
Yeah, that's taking it to the
universal.
philosophical level, right?
Yeah,
Like, see, Rousseau took it
but I'm
from the
saying it
basis of.
works on every level.
It does. But Rousseau, with his political theory, took it from he started from the naturalistic level, right, and worked upwards. You can take it to a philosophical level too, and say that exactly that. Well, I want to be free, therefore, bullet to my head. There you go. I'm free, in
Yeah,
that sense. Or you could say I want to be free to exist, but you exist regardless of you wanting to be free of it or not. So freedom sort of loses its meaning in that manner.
I don't
Like I
know.
said,
I'm tired of the word freedom. I don't know why we're
yeah, we
talking
can
about
look at
freedom.
it from a philosophical perspective, or we can, go to go to another level. It doesn't matter. What I'm trying to say is, ultimately speaking, whether you're talking about politics, whether you're talking about community, whether you're talking about well-being, there's the two. There's usually a two sides, two necessitations, let's say, right? The
Hmm.
individual and the community, freedom of nature versus freedom of sovereign, sovereignty, whatever. All these sort of like, I like to see them as two sides of the paradox. But anyway, the point is these two counterbalances need what? They need balance, right? They can't always just rest, you know, one side extreme or the other. I mean, they can't go back and forth like this all the time. We're ultimately always trying to get them balanced, right?
Yeah.
So that's basically the enigmatic functioning of well-being of the individual. Whether you want to look at it from the perspective of just being human as we are today, or as we were, 100,000 years ago, or as the transhumanist sort of biosynthetic God, is that we're always going to have to deal with this sort of like individual versus community, purpose versus absurdity. You know what I mean? These things, you can't escape them, regardless of you being half robot, half human, or half psychopath, half compassionate type person, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
And again, I'm getting
Sounds
really fucking loud. I'm like too really
good.
passionate to be talking about this stuff in public.
No, it makes sense.
So we've done is establish the problem for people. I think it's like, go figure it out now.
Yeah, I mean, we're really flowing from one thing to the other. We're not really laying out some kind of presentation or anything.
Well, I
Um,
mean, some people like to just listen to
yeah,
rabble.
no, for sure. I know. I'm not saying that there's any problem with this.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, at that point, that's a tough question. Also, I mean, the what comes to mind, I don't know if this just leads us to another topic, is who gets to decide what is best for the community? That's a nasty question.
Well, the community decides, right? That's what democracy is all about. But it becomes more complicated if you want to break it down into its parts. Yeah.
Okay, if that's what democracy is, then we don't have a democracy.
No, we don't. But here the thing is, and Pearson really lays this out brilliantly, and it's very simple. And it's that hierarchical structures are probably the oldest things within life, not just
Sure.
humans.
Yeah.
It has to do with life. Hierarchy, power dynamics. That's just intrinsic to evolution, to life. You can't change these things. And obviously, we know that the issue with hierarchical structures is that they can tilt into tyranny, right? There's always a sort of like corruption, that risk. How you deal with that risk, is through community, through democracy, through everybody having some kind of input. The problem there is obviously what's happening now with the left is that everybody wants to have their value, their input in a manner that is, collectivist. And you can't do it on the basis of collectivism, because then you run into that problem. Well, who decides? If you all decide what it means to be racist, for example, or what evil means, then who ultimately makes the decision on the laws, right? Because collectivist ideologies and sort of like groupthink, it's 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 an oppression. It's a strange thing, because it's a self-imposed oppression that nobody actually wants, but everybody wants by virtue of trying to gain some individualistic power. Do you know what I mean? It's like putting yourself through something to gain something that you ultimately don't want without you realizing it, and it just doesn't work. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, history has shown it doesn't work. It's
exactly. So democracy, like I said, I think epistocracy would be a finer tool. Like democracy had worked for a while, and it's still, and it can still work today. But ultimately speaking, I think we should get down to brass tacks and accept reality for what it is. We are all different. We're not all the same, and we have different expertises. Like, you don't go to a dentist for your heart surgery, right? You go to a fucking surgeon because of his expertise. Well, I don't want people choosing economic policies if they're not economists. I want the best economists in the world to inform me on the decision.
And I want a guy who disagrees with him who's equally experienced
Exactly.
to figure it out together.
Exactly. What I would do is I would set up an epistocracy where the elections for the economic, like obviously the predicate to becoming Minister of Finance would be that you're an economist, you're one of the best in the country, and all the best economists of the country would sort of like be put up for election, and then they would obviously all work together regardless of who wins, who ultimately makes the decision, but there would be counterbalances there, you know what I mean? And obviously, and here's the thing with epistocracy, people say, well, okay, you're still leaving it up to the intellectuals. Like, what about morality? That has nothing to do with sort of like, it has nothing to do with, like, obviously when it comes to morality, it has nothing to do with expertise. And so morality does need to be democratic directly.
Okay. Well, so, that's a whole other show, morality in itself. I'll write it down.
It is, but all I'm saying is I want people to understand that epistocracy doesn't mean that we leave it up to the smart guys completely. What we do is there is an implementation where regular citizens, everybody still gets to vote and say, oh, okay, here's what we actually want. And that actually has an impact, a sort of influence as well. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
An informed decision to the guys who are the epistocrats. So it's not what people think. They're like, oh, that's just another sort of. They think that some people think that epistocracy is like a new form of autocracy in a sense.
Well, what I would like to do is do a whole show on, or maybe several shows on different political structures.
Yeah, that would be interesting because it's part of it too. But yeah, we
writing
kind
it
of
down
strayed.
right now.
Yeah, good. We had strayed, and we were kind of running over. But, I think.
Well, okay. I vote monarchy.
Statement?
By the way, I want to be king.
Yeah. King Oliver.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I like that. King Oliver the First.
Yeah. King Trolliver Gold.
King Trolliver Gold.
Anyways.
I hope that I know some like cutting off, especially the first half hour there.
Really?
I hope that doesn't happen.
Okay.
Maybe not from your side, but from my side. Anyway, you're the one recording, so anyway, we should end it here. Take it easy. I hope people start commenting on our videos. You better share it.
Yeah, seriously. People give us feedback. We want to improve. We're just winging it here, and this is fun for us. We're just doing for me, this is not so much the real work yet. This is like
we're practicing.
This is the seeds. These are the seeds, and we're putting them out there so that they, we throw them in the fire of public opinion, and then we'll see what comes out. We'll harden
Exactly.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I think we got to get good at being clear with our ideas, and like, just we need to be good speakers, good dialogue forgers, you know.
And
So
I like the one-word themes or the very basic themes because we went into this with a pretty vague topic. But yeah, something that we can keep coming back to. So I think we should call this show Biology, Transhumanism, and Epistocracies. It could just be a whole eclectic
yeah.
title. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we mostly talked about sort of transhumanism and like, because what you were talking about, the concept that we started with was that, right? It was like, you know, human in between. You have like the conceptual world and reality, and so how we relate between both as a bridge. And I think we did that with the notion of the relation between the human and these two different kinds of worlds. We did it with technology. We did it with health. We did it with politics. We did it with socio sort of like political things. I think
A little.
we respected the content, the topic, the topic of content. We did respect it. So um, yeah. Anyway, we should leave it at that for now.
Okay. All right.
All right, bro. You have a
Stuff,
good
man.
night. Cool.
Take it easy. Take it sleazy.
Peace.